the least surprising development of the coaching carousel thus far. The Patriots, of course, abruptly moved on from Gerard Mayo on the day of their last game, just an hour and a half after their season-ending win over the Buffalo Bills, or that version of the Buffalo Bills in Week 18. They moved on from Gerard Mayo. A lot of folks across the NFL thought it would mean they'd quickly move to Mike Vrabel. That's exactly what happened. And really, I have two thoughts on this one. And they don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can love the hire and hate the process. I love the hire and hate the process. I think the process, to be frank about it, sucked. And I like when you look at the way this whole thing worked and the way the Patriots have been over the last 25 years, where they've been, what they have seen, it's a very insular place. And for 20 years, that worked at an incredibly high level, at a historic level. With Bill Belichick as the head coach, Scott Pioli, the head of personnel. After that, Nick Caserio. They rolled. They basically won the division title every year. I think it wound up being 17 of 19 years. If you look at the breadth of it, they went to AFC championship game after AFC championship game after AFC championship game. They played in an incredible 9 Super Bowls. They won 6 of them. So the way that they came off the Bill Belichick era is to be expected. This is how most dynasties react when they come off of a great coach or a great quarterback. They try to do everything they can to extend their period of success, and they did that in going to Gerard Mayo a year ago. But I thought even then the process wasn't great. Yes, they wrote the succession plan into the contract. Yes, I felt like Gerard Mayo had a very high ceiling as a coach. It was absolutely a year or 2, maybe even 3 before they expected to do it. But setting things up the way that they did, they cost themselves a look around the league at the way other teams are doing business. Again, they did things one way for a quarter century. And the reality of it was that over that time, the NFL evolved and changed in a lot of different ways and moved past the model that Bill Belichick was hired into. And the way it was set up under Bill Belichick is the way a lot of teams were doing it in the 90s, in the early 2000s, where the head coach had the final say over everything, where the head coach was the king of the castle. But over time, those things have changed. And Belichick was so capable of doing things that way because he was capable of doing so many things. There are very few coaches that can do as much as Bill Belichick was able to do. And even now, if you were asking Bill Belichick to run the sort of operation, say the Eagles or the Ravens or the Rams or the Niners have, he wouldn't be able to do it. It's just too big a job. And so, I think even last year, even coming out of the 23 season and elevating Gerard Mayo, they cost themselves by creating the succession plan, the chance to look across the NFL and see the way other teams do business. Then they cost themselves that again this year, and going through the process the way that they did, making a mockery of the Rooney Rule the way that they did, and bringing in Pep Hamilton and Byron Leftwich for interviews last week, and doing them as quickly as they did so they could clear the decks to hire Mike Vrabel. They cost themselves the chance to look at a lot of other qualified candidates. And this isn't the first time that they've done that, right? Like, so if you want to go back 2 years to when they hired Bill O'Brien as their offensive coordinator, they really didn't hire any other candidates they were considering hiring for the coordinator job. They knew that Bill O'Brien was going to be the next man up. In fact, they had sort of back channeled that for a while. And so they interviewed Adrian Clem, who became their offensive line coach. They interviewed Keenan McCardell, who they were never getting out of Minnesota in a position coaching role to fulfill the Rooney Rule. Then they hire O'Brien. That's 1. 2 would be Mayo last year when they didn't have any process because of the succession plan. 3, last May, they elevated Elliott Wolf into the top personnel position without really opening that one up. They interviewed Brandon Hunt, Samir Suleiman, and then hired and then quickly turned around and hired Elliott Wolf as their head of personnel. And now this is the 4th time they've done this. So when do the rules apply to you? When do you need to go through a process? I look back at the Chargers process last year and I see a situation where the Chargers were expected from the very beginning to look at Jim Harbaugh seriously as their head coach. And they interviewed 15 guys for the head coaching job. They interviewed 9 guys for the general manager job. And they wound up back where they started, where everybody thought they would end. which was on Jim Harbaugh as their head coach, and getting a general manager in Joe Ortiz that paired with Jim Harbaugh. He, of course, had worked for Jim's brother John in Baltimore. But they were better off for having gone through it. And I think the Spanos family would tell you that. They learned a lot about the way other teams do business. They were able to pick up a lot of things about the way the rest of the league operated. And in doing so, they were able to support Jim Harbaugh better because they had gotten that look across the NFL. And it also gave them a chance to look in inward at their own organization and give all these coaches and these general manager candidates a chance to look at what they had done and criticize what they had done and tell them what they would do differently. And so they had the bones of what they wanted to set up for Jim Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz in place. They could have given Mike Vrabel that by going through the process. So that's the first piece of it. Is I think the process sucked, and I've been very open about that. I think it was a sham process. It made a mockery of the Rooney Rule, and it was also passing up the opportunity to make your organization better and give Mike Vrabel a better chance to succeed. Now that said, here's the flip side of it. They absolutely nailed this hire. Mike Vrabel is a home run hire. I think Mike Vrabel is exactly what they need. I know a lot of people will look at Drake May and say, you got to find somebody to coach the quarterback. I think Mike Vrabel will be able to find that person to coach the quarterback. And I think this is more than a one-person problem for New England. So going and hiring somebody to coach one guy wasn't going to fix all that was wrong with the organization. And this isn't just Gerard Mayo. It was way more, again, than a one-person problem. There were bigger issues within the organization. And that's why I think the next string of hires is going to be important too. Is like, you got the guy now who can turn your culture. You got the guy who's going to be able to reestablish a standard. Now, are you looking at this as Bill Belichick 2.0, where you're going to put the old system in place and you don't have to hire new people or create new departments or do things the way that the most successful teams in the NFL are doing them? Or is this just the first move in a string of them where you're going to create a support system and an infrastructure around Vrabel that is up with the best organizations in the NFL? Because the Patriots very clearly aren't in that class anymore, and they haven't been for a while.